Welcome back to our 157th anniversary of Gettysburg Facebook Lives. My name is Pete Miele, Executive Director of Seminary Ridge Museum. We are here on the Peace Portico at the rear of the western face of Seminary Ridge Museum. And I want to piggyback a little bit on what Caleb and Cody talked about during their last video. They talked about the Iron Brigade going into battle on McPherson Ridge. And there's something else very important, but tends to be overlooked that's happening at about the same time, and that's the transformation of this building, the seminary building, into a field hospital. So at about 10 o'clock in the morning, as the Iron Brigade is marching across the open fields, Dr. George New of the 7th Indiana is looking around for a building that can be used as a field hospital to treat the wounded soldiers that are inevitably going to result from this action that's going to be taking place. And he looks around and he notices the largest building in the area, this building, as the perfect space for a field hospital. There had been a lot of advancements in Civil War, what I call Civil War medical logistics, by the time of the Battle of Gettysburg. And I use that term is something that, we're good, Rob?
It said we had a poor connection.
Okay, we might have had a poor connection for a moment, but
it was paused. We should be back.
Okay, we should be back. Sorry about that. Civil War medical logistics versus Civil War medical science, because doctors are learning a lot about the human body during the Civil War, making advancements in science, but there are a lot of advancements in treating wounded soldiers, moving wounded soldiers off the field, and getting them the best care possible. And this is all part of something called the Letterman Plan that is instituted by Army of the Potomac Medical Director Jonathan Letterman between 1862 and 1863. And what Letterman says is that there's going to be a sort of a tiered medical system, that there's going to be a forward first aid station or a primary aid station that is going to be established right behind the line of battle. This is going to be staffed by an assistant surgeon or a hospital steward or a hospital steward. Talk a little bit about that in a second. This is a place where wounded soldiers are going to come back and be treated and then loaded onto ambulances to be brought back to a larger field hospital like here at the seminary building. And as a patient would be brought into this seminary building, they would probably be triaged as the day goes on and there are more and more wounded soldiers. The triage system is becoming more important. We're going to treat soldiers based on the severity of their wounds and the likelihood that they will survive with prompt care, leaving soldiers that are lightly wounded to be treated later, and soldiers who are most likely going to die, those who have gotten a head wound or a gut wound, making them comfortable but not expending our resources on them. Also, as part of the Letterman system, the 3 best surgeons in the division are going to be performing the surgeries. They are going to be called the operators. So we're choosing people based on their merit rather than based on their rank, which had been the system before Jonathan Letterman. So you could have a surgeon who is higher in rank but not as skilled, and he would be doing the surgeries. We're going to change that around and recognize people for their ability to practice proper surgery and have the most ability and best care for the patient. So that's going to be going on in this building as the day goes on. I want to talk a little bit, I mentioned that primary aid station a little bit ago. As the day goes on, we have a really great view of a primary aid station at the McPherson home. Dr. James Fulton of the 150th Pennsylvania goes out, is sent out to establish a forward first aid station at the McPherson farm. He gets out there and he looks around for his hospital steward, who isn't with him. Hospital steward was the one that was carrying all the equipment, and Fulton is forced to come back here to the seminary to try to find this hospital steward, find his equipment. Finds that, but as he comes back here, he is put in command of setting up the 3rd Division Field Hospital, and he goes down into town to the Catholic Church and the Presbyterian Church and sets up the field hospital there, and that's where he is going to be he's actually going to be captured as the Confederate Army takes the town of Gettysburg, and he is going to be essentially a prisoner for the next 4 days until the Confederate Army retreats. But he was, we know by looking at his writings, and his diary has been published in the last year by Robert Hicks of the Military Museum. Talks very clearly, if you know the Letterman system and read about what Fulton is writing about, it's pretty evident that he was sent to the McPherson Farm to set up that aid station for the Bucktail Brigade. I want to talk a little bit about why this view. Why are we here and on the western side of the seminary building? This is probably the doorway. Now the portico was not here until 1914, but there was a staircase, a wooden staircase, and this door right here. And we know that many of the soldiers were being brought into this building by this doorway, and we have a great account of two soldiers from the Bucktails, the 149th, Levi Graham and Bryce Blair, who are making their way back to this building. Now, it was set up as a 1st Division field hospital, so it should only have been taking soldiers from the 1st Division of the 1st Corps, but by the end of the day, it is taking soldiers from the 3rd Division as well. And Bryce Blair and Levi Graham are coming up the steps of this building, up the wooden steps, and they look around them and they notice that shots are being hit into the wooden staircase, and it's too dangerous for them to try to get in this door, and they have to go around to the other side to gain access. Levi Graham is going to not be wounded, but he is going to be a prisoner in this building, and if you saw our video earlier from up in the cupola, he is the one that in 1909 writes the letter where he says he saw Robert E. Lee up in the cupola watching surveying the land on July 3rd. Our most famous patient, at least on the Union side, is Lieutenant Colonel George McFarland of the 151st Pennsylvania Volunteers, a 9-month regiment that is less than a month away from mustering out when they arrive here at Gettysburg. And Lieutenant Colonel McFarland brings his men to Gettysburg. They go out and they fight in Herbst Woods, cover the retreat of the Iron Brigade and Biddle's Brigade off of McPherson Ridge, back here behind the barricade of rails where they fight. We'll be talking about that a little bit later today. And then McFarland is retreating with his men. He is behind his men, and he comes within 20 paces of the northwest corner of the seminary building when 2 bullets of volley fired from the 1st South Carolina hits him in both legs, and he crumples down to the ground right here and is dragged into the Seminary Hospital by a private, and he is talks about lying on the floor in a pool of his own blood for 3 days until the Union Army retakes the seminary building. By most accounts, by McFarland's accounts and the accounts of others in the building, as the building becomes a field, as the building is taken over by the Confederates take most of the supplies, medical supplies, for themselves. And McFarland talks about not receiving food, water, or medical care for 3 days until the Union Army retakes the building. When the Union Army retakes the building on July 5th, surgeries begin in earnest. They're gathering gathering wounded soldiers off the field, performing surgeries. And then sometime administratively during the month of July, the building turns into a general hospital. And what this means is that it's taking soldiers from all different parts of the Army of the Potomac, and indeed even some soldiers from the Confederate Army. We have some famous Confederate generals who spend time here in the hospital: James Kemper, Isaac Trimble, Robert Powell from the 5th Texas Infantry, and Henry Kid Douglas are all patients here in the Seminary Hospital. George McFarland is going to be the last patient to leave here at the Seminary Hospital. He's not going to leave until September 16th, 1863. Part of the Letterman Plan was ensuring that soldiers had rebuilt their strength enough to be able to be safely moved. So if you weren't if you weren't in a good position to be moved, you weren't going to be moved. So we're not exactly sure about McFarland, but he obviously was not well enough to be moved until 2.5 months after his wounding. But he leaves here September 16th, 1863, and classes are going to begin again in this building on time on September 24th, only 8 days after McFarland leaves. So thank you for joining us for a little bit about the Seminary Hospital. The entire 3rd floor of this building today looks at the use of this building as a field hospital and some of the advancements that were made in both Civil War medical logistics, the Letterman Plan, but also advancements in Civil War medical science, how doctors and the Army were using the Civil War to learn about the human body and treat diseases and treat injuries that they had never seen before. So I invite you, I hope that you'll come by and see the importance of this building, the importance of the medical corps of the Civil War into helping treat the massive amount of wounded men that resulted from both the Battle of Gettysburg and the Civil War in general. So we'll be back at about 4 o'clock this afternoon. So the fighting begins again here in this sector of the battlefield, and we'll talk about the barricade of rails that was constructed on the west slope of Seminary Ridge, the last stand of the Union First Corps before retreating through town. So that's at 4 o'clock, and then at 5 o'clock this afternoon, we will be looking at this area, this whole area of the ridge in Confederate control, something I like to call the Confederate Nerve Center. So we thank you for watching. Please like this. Please share it with your friends. Comment if you have any questions. We'll be looking through and answering those as we go forward. This is Pete Miele, Seminary Ridge Museum, Facebook Live, the 157th anniversary of the first day of the Battle of Gettysburg, and we hope to see you on the Ridge soon.